When I was a kid, I read a lot, and I'll admit my experience with video games is very limited, up until I moved out on my own at 17. However, one of the first of two games I played when I was a kid was Rainbow Six on the original PlayStation, the latter being Halo Combat Evolved. I was only allowed to play these games sparingly, but those tiny moments I spent shooting grunts and elites, or prepping for missions to go save a hostage, were pretty darn fun. These, of course, were my dad's games, but in order to fulfill my imagination's thirst for excitement in any of these two worlds meant I had to read the books. And read them I did. I read quite a few of Tom Clancy's books when I was a kid, and it only made me wonder more about what other games could be with Tom Clancy's world. When I got to play Splinter Cell, also on the original PlayStation, I was not disappointed. When I moved out and got my own apartment, I put my savings into a gaming PC, and played through a bunch of games I'd missed over the years. Granted, not all of them were good, and it seemed like a lot of the older ones were better, but when I finally got around to trying out Rainbow Six Siege, it was a little depressing. Siege and I have had a love-hate relationship for quite some time. I have put about 730 hours into this game, considering I play anywhere from 5 to 8 games a week. Siege still remains my most played game. But today, I wish to discuss with you my frustrations with this development and Siege's current direction. Rainbow Six Siege is such a distant relative to the original Rainbow Six series that it almost feels undeserving of the Rainbow Six IP. Now, before I get into the meat of this statement, first let me start by saying that this is an opinion, so before you flood the comments with things like Rainbow Six Siege is great and your mom is gay, please consider this. After doing all my research and playing the games, and even having read a few of Tom Clancy's books, I honestly feel like the developers don't remember what Rainbow Six is. Siege is an entirely different game today in 2021 than any of the original Rainbow Six titles, even compared to what Siege was on release. In 1984, a novelist named Tom Clancy wrote his first book called The Hunt for Red October, a spy fiction thriller. After gaining some notoriety, he wrote a few more books, all having similar premises: special forces dealing with terrorists. After working with the dev team to make a game based off one of his novels, SSN, he joined forces with them and created Red Storm Entertainment. And in 1998, they released Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. The game was a hardcore tactical FPS. Emphasis was focused on the one-hit kill system and the team command, the ability to tell your AI teammates where to go and what to do. There was a pre-planning phase before each mission, and you would select your squad members based on their specialties and assign them to tasks or units. You could also assign them gear and weapons based on the player's missions to succeed. This game is one of the earliest games to showcase tactical breaches and close quarters combat. Also, this is the origin of what is known as Terrorist Hunt, in which you play in randomly generated scenarios where you try to accomplish a specific task inside a terrorist-filled location. In 1999, the sequel Rainbow Six Rogue Spear was released, offering a similar game with improved mechanics along with a few new ones. Focus was still on a one-shot kill, leaning was added, and a larger arsenal of gadgets and weapons were available to choose from. Notably, all gadgets were things that existed in real life and were implemented to create a realistic tactical setting. It wasn't until 2003 that Ubisoft acquired Red Storm Entertainment. This was also the year that Rainbow Six 3 Raven Shield was released. This installment included better graphics and mechanics all around. Smoothing out the team commands in the pre-planning phase to less cluttered and complicated. This allowed players to express themselves and plan out their missions on how they wanted them to be. One thing that was improved a lot was the door mechanics. Doors were important to Rainbow Six. It was important for players to be able to realistically peek doors and breach them, and have possible negative consequences to haphazardly rushing through them. This was also the time that T-Hunt became popular in the online community on PC. Players could work together to kill all the terrorists or secure the bomb. In 2005, it was Rainbow Six Siege Lockdown. In 2006, it was Critical Hour in Vegas. And in 2008, it was Vegas 2. Notably, these titles had their ups and downs with certain players, due to the lack of playability on consoles, and more emphasis on story and cutscenes that didn't play altogether well. There were also a few changes added, like the third-person camera peeking and the zip lines. What made these games unique were the approach to missions and the ability to give commands to AI teammates. By allowing players to plan and execute their actions with the gadgets and teammates of their choosing, they make Rainbow more immersive and attention-grabbing. Granted, the story wasn't all there as far as being super entertaining, and I personally only paid attention briefly to the details, but the simple act of making a plan and executing it perfectly was very exhilarating. It made you experiment and think about your actions before you did them, without being too difficult at the same time. Simple things like T-Hunt, leaning, doors, and gadgets were the staples to these games. The option to play how you wanted to play made these games like Rainbow Six Ravenshield stand out. 2014, when Ubisoft showed a trailer for Rainbow Six Siege, the game appeared to be returned to its roots with a few new twists. The trailer showed a 5v5 hostage rescue with a new system that allowed bullets and explosives to destroy certain walls, along with a focus on team play. The trailer showed some promise, but in 2015, Siege was released with a lot of bumps. Gameplay was sticky and very different to that of the trailer, along with the fact that the servers were even worse. They had gotten rid of the random operators you had seen in the trailer and replaced them with operators with specific gadgets and guns. No campaign was in sight, and T-Hunt was abysmal. Now, obviously Siege has climbed from its early grave with bug fixes, new operators, new maps, and better servers and mechanics. And I give the dev team a congratulations for all their hard work. But before I start comparing it to its predecessors, we have to discuss whether we can. You see, just because something was designed by the same company, or uses the same name, or is in the same universe, doesn't necessarily mean that they compare evenly. For example, for those that have played Halo as a child, look at Halo Wars versus Halo 1 through 3. Halo 1 through 3 was a phenomenal FPS shooter, and Halo Wars was an RTS, or real-time strategy game. Though it was designed by the same company, used the same name, and had the same lore, it was such a drastic difference to the main Halo games that you just can't compare them. Halo Wars wasn't striving to be anything like Halo 1, 2, 3. It was made to be purposely different, so comparing its differences wouldn't really be fair. Now let's say, for example, Halo Wars started out as an FPS and advertised as one upon release, and then gradually changed into an RTS. Well, then I say comparing the differences is okay. Granted, this theoretical statement is a drastic one as far as examples go. We will use this to see if Siege is inherently different to that of Rainbow Six franchise. While Siege is obviously in the same universe and uses the same lore as Rainbow Six, it also uses the same name and was designed with the same company. As of 2021, Siege is a somewhat hardcore FPS shooter with emphasis on team play. It uses the same pre-planning phase along with the leaning mechanics found in Ravenshield, along with the zipline and the breach mechanic found in Vegas 2, and it features maps found in old games like Chalet. But other than that, it doesn't have a T-Hunt, it doesn't have missions, they don't fight terrorism, it's only PvP oriented in a competitive setting. They don't have AI except for in training, and let's be honest, they're abysmal. So once we've looked at this, you might wonder how Siege can still be compared to Rainbow Six when it's so obviously trying to be an entirely different game. Well, remember when I said that if Halo Wars had released initially as an FPS, then it would be entirely different? Well, Siege is similar in a way. You see, Siege advertised this trailer as a 5v5 hostage rescue. It had distinctly operators on one side and terrorists on the other. It kept with the theme of Rainbow Six team fighting terrorists. Upon release, Siege had a mission and T-Hunt. It also wasn't initially released with being solely competitive in mind. But over time, in the last 6 years, Ubisoft has changed Siege up so much that these original elements are gone. The word terrorist has been completely removed from the game, the mission I spoke of also removed, T-Hunt got a name change and is only used for training. When the game came out, the bad guys were replaced with the operators, who aren't even bad guys themselves, mind you. Even if I go back to the original design for Siege, they had doors in mind just like in Ravenshield. Why they took them out before the beta is beyond me. The mission upon release was called Article 5. You had to complete a bunch of narrated tutorials to get there that taught basic mechanics. But Article 5 had cutscenes and a story. It was a co-op only PvE mission, and it was left the door open for the possibility for more. But it never came. T-Hunt was released, and I'll be honest, it was very bare bones. Some people enjoyed it, but for me, it was like a Call of Duty bot match on easy. I, as an average player, could do T-Hunts haphazardly and come out almost unscathed. So now we have enough to say for sure that Siege was trying to identify itself as something fresh and exciting, but also as something familiar. By taking in the previous mechanics and lore and even considering having some of the pre-alpha phases, we can see that Siege appeared to have identity crisis. So now let's discuss some of Siege's mechanics and lore that are there upon release or have been recently added that raise some question. Now, I could complain about the lack of doors, or the terrible hipfire and shotgun usage, but instead we're going to discuss my 3 biggest complaints about Siege. The first is T-Hunt, or lack of one thereof. I know a lot of people that played the old R6 games in the past and would solely play T-Hunt. There were a lot of players who enjoyed it. When I tried to play Siege's T-Hunt, I was definitely expecting something more, but it wasn't entirely half bad. What surprised me the most was the fact that there were whole communities out there that just played T-Hunt and didn't care for the PvP side of Siege. Lo and behold, when the competitive community complained about a lack of shooting range or a practice mode, Ubisoft just removed anything interesting from T-Hunt, including its name, and called it training. Now, they not only excluded a portion of their community, but also shit on all Rainbow Six fans that day by removing the word terrorist. That's also when Article 5 was removed. There was nothing left for the co-op fans to look forward to anymore. My second complaint is about the inconsistent ability to decide whether spawn peeking is allowed. Games that have spawn killing in them are hard to take seriously on a competitive level. Games like Call of Duty are super casual because you're almost guaranteed to get spawn killed or spawn kill someone else yourself. It's a weird mechanic because it's literally like every time you die, you spin a wheel to decide whether you deserve a second death or not, that you can't prevent. Obviously, this is not seen in COD's competitive scene, only in casual, because spawn killing is in most cases nothing you can do to prevent it. Most games get rid of it in a competitive mode by either having the mode not to respawn you or having spawn protection, like in League. The problem is when you die in Siege, you don't respawn until the next round, but you can still be spawn killed. Now I know some people will say, well, spawn killing and spawn peeking are two different things, Myth. Well, it's really not. The only people who enjoy spawn peeking mechanics are the ones who have to put thousands of hours into the game and either spawn peek themselves or know how to avoid it on specific maps. The issue with it is that having it in the game doesn't make sense, and it cramps on any new players or mediocre players. The number of times spawn peekers have been killed versus the number of times a spawn peeker gets a kill is like a 1-to-5 ratio.
I'm not a fan of runouts or spawn peaks. So like if you come through this, right, you have to watch out for that window, that window, that window, that window, that window, that door, that window, and up there. And they could run out over there. So when you're right here, making your way just to this building, there's all of those places they could be hiding from and jump out on.
Yep. Okay.
Case in point!
I have seen Platinum players get wrecked off spawn peekers, leaving it too unbalanced of a mechanic to convince me that's even fair for competitive players. When someone is trying to convince you that a mechanic is okay, and they say, I don't particularly enjoy matches where the opposing team constantly runs out and spawn peeks everything, then that means it's broken. Mechanic balancing shouldn't be left to the players not to abuse. Furthermore, when devs add gadgets in the game, like the hard breach, in order to prevent a team from possibly losing because the only hard breacher they had was spawn peek 10 seconds into the match, that just tells me that the devs are aware of the issue of spawn peeking causes, but instead of fixing it, they'd rather offer some alternative solution that just ruins the point of being a hard breacher in the first place. Ubisoft has made some changes to the maps to prevent some spawn peeking from happening, but it seems weird that they won't remove it completely. It doesn't seem like a mechanic meant to be there in the first place because most of the time players have to get on higher areas or ledges or memorize the timing of certain things to make it happen. Yet Ubisoft still won't prevent it, which isn't easy enough. Now that I've named a few of the mechanics that either don't make sense or make a lackluster game, most people's defense to this would be to say that Siege's multiplayer is just a simulation or a training session. And yes, evidence would support that. The Tournament of Champions trailer made it seem like every game is just a training session for the Rainbow Six operatives, and that they fire pellets or something instead of real bullets. Well, I'm going to tell you that the devs just recently pulled that BS out of their asses. Why would you take the topmost elite counter-terrorist operators in the world and have them train on one another with their own special gadgets? If you're training to fight terrorists, then you train in those types of situations. The game also wouldn't have blood in it when you killed someone. In fact, only recently they took away the dead bodies because, again, the competitive players were complaining about them. So now it's so fake that when you shoot someone, they disappear. This reinforces the push towards Ubisoft catering to its competitive audience, which shuttles on my last point, which is something that has been driving me away from the game and making me play League of Legends. Siege's push towards being a competitive shooter. If Siege had done this from the beginning, it would be different. But Siege wasn't competitive in the beginning. In fact, many of the things I've discussed that make Siege look less competitive were removed over the years. The other issue is that Ubisoft seems so intent on having Siege focused on ranked and esports that they offer almost nothing to their casual audience besides the casual mode itself, which is the same as ranked, but just less rounds. This, and the fact that most esports-oriented games offer both modes for casual and new players, and the more competitive ones, for example, like League and Valorant, though both are sweaty games for sure, offer modes like ARAM or Deathmatch for the more casual player to enjoy, whereas Siege got rid of whatever they offered and replaced it with Training Grounds, an even more dumbed down version of T-Hunt for players to shoot some moving targets and some maps. Yay, fun. I think my biggest problem is that Ubisoft uses the IP of Rainbow Six for Siege and transforms what could have been a great Rainbow Six game into an FPS competitive shooter that now has nothing to do with Rainbow, but for the namesake. It shits on its original fanbase and only accepts players that care about ranking. Yes, there's casual, but the toxicity of the community towards new players, the lack of anything short of helping hands or a mode for new players to learn, the spawn peeking mechanics that ruin their day, and the number of smurf accounts and low-level queues is rough. The issue is that the game started out to be what seemed like a PvP love letter to Ravenshield, and that turned into a farce. The game offers nothing to what Rainbow is, to what Tom Clancy wrote all those years ago, and what he developed. Siege has nothing in common with it anymore. No missions, no co-op activities besides the terrible T-Hunt. The one thing they do offer costs $60 upon release and is hot trash. Extraction. The fact that it's 2021 and it still has loot boxes, alpha packs, is in itself disgusting. I know some people are blind to the fact that alpha packs are loot boxes, but they are. If you pay for something and what you receive is random, then it's gambling. We hated EA when they did it, but Redditors will suck Ubi's dick for giving away alpha packs for free. I can get behind a battle pass or cosmetics, but loot boxes are a note for me. And lastly, I didn't even cover anything regarding bugs, terrible headshot registration, shitty netcoding, and cheaters in the game. Ubisoft, get your shit together. Also, as a final note, as I was editing this video, Ubisoft announced a new game called X Defiant. As you well know, they slapped the name Tom Clancy on it. Look at the like to dislike ratio. People are upset because they don't think Ubisoft even knows what it means to be a Tom Clancy game, further enforcing my point about Rainbow. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in Discord on stream. Have a great day.